Mr. Chair, I believe they've started.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Brett, can you please count us down?
You want to start anyway?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you, Mr. Superintendent. It's a pleasant surprise. Okay, let's call the meeting to order and call the roll, please.
Superintendent Chaudhary?
Present. Just for the record, Senator Casemeyer, I have been in the meetings. Sometimes I'm on the road. You're just on the phone, but
yeah,
IAC staff can confirm that I have been in every.
No, I heard you weren't going to be here today. That's all.
Oh no, I made it through. From Prince George's, but yeah, sometimes I am taking it on the road. I do apologize, but
no problem.
I don't want you to see my chin while I'm.
Mine either. Go ahead.
Secretary Churchill?
Present.
Mr. Derenberg is present. Ms. Eberhardt?
Here.
Mr. Gibbons just joined us. Ms. Lala is absent. Mr. Lombardo is absent. Secretary McCord?
Present.
And Chair Casemeyer?
Here.
Gibbons also joined.
Yep. Do we have any revisions, Cassandra?
No, Mr. Chair.
No revisions.
No public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Bob, you want to go through this consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Item by item?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We can. The first item that we have in the consent agenda is item 1A. It's our minutes. The second item is a summary from the last meeting. The second item is a summary of contract approvals that we have made this month. These would be previous allocations. And then these would be the contracts that go to those allocations. This is a big step that has to occur. I'll talk about it in the final item H here in just a moment. Item 1C are the allocation reversions for a project that they're finished with, and there was a little bit of money left. It was in Howard County. Project closeouts. This is a list of the projects that we have completed, and they have been closed out financially. Item E is Washington County Technical High School. It's a property transfer, Mr. Chair, and there's a map in there for you to see it. All of these items require a vote. Yeah. The next items, F through G and H.
Why don't we do A through E first?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Out of the way. Any questions about A through E? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? Okay. All in favor of consent agenda A through E, just say aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Built to Learn project worksheets. These are projects the IAC approved for revised allocations for funding through the Built to Learn program. There's 4. The computational, and you did this the last meeting, the computational worksheets, however, were excluded at that meeting. And we put them in there so as a matter of record. So we wanted to get them into the record, and that's what we're doing now. And so you'll find the 4 computational worksheets that are based on our standard formulaic process. Even though that Charles, however, is one that doesn't have a computational worksheet because it's pre-K and kindergarten that we don't follow the formula. It's not something that's well established, so we don't try to force fit that. Item 1G. And Mr. Chair, on any of these items, if you or any of the members have questions, I'll pause at the end, or you can call me afterwards. Item G is the Built to Learn project status report. We introduced this a couple of meetings ago, and we want to demonstrate what's on track, what is slipping, what's ahead. The blues are projects that are ahead. We see in Montgomery has 2 of them. The reds are projects that are behind. We have a couple behind at Baltimore County. And in Montgomery, there's a couple behind, but you'll see that the yellows are the ones that we worry about. The green are right on target. Item H is our overall. These are projects that we're worried about. That we, as I said earlier, we want projects to be, and by statute they have to be in contract within 2 years of the funding allocation. That, of course, makes a lot of sense this year when it looks like we have somewhere between 8.5% and 11% inflation or escalation for construction projects. Whenever we don't allocate those dollars every year that passes, if it's 10% a year, we just lost 20% of the value of that contract. So it's something that we're trying to get better and better on. We keep pushing for more planning so that whenever projects come to us and the funding is allocated, it starts construction hopefully the next day. And that way we'll maximize the use of all of our funding. But these are projects that we're worried about. We've got our eye on. We're talking to them, to these LEAs, and trying to help them get these things into contracts so that they don't revert. Mr. Chair and members, there's a statute that says when the dollars revert that it goes back to the LEA and then they can allocate it to another project or back to the same project. You're going to see a couple of items later on in this presentation that are in items 3 and 4, where you're seeing that we have to reform projects with the dollars that have just been reverted. But again, we've lost the value of the funds that was originally there. We again keep trying to push to get these projects lined up so that they go well. And I'm giving you this just as information so that you know it's a target that has been set by legislature. There is a statute that requires us to revert the dollars. We don't think that was the original purpose of the reversion. Best that we can guess, the purpose was to award LEAs that brought their projects in under budget. That way they would get the funds back and they could use them for another project as a reward. So it's something that we keep looking at. We keep trying to figure out ways to improve so that the projects move along. One of them is planning. You'll see in one of the projects below that has reverted. We are not recommending dollars to go towards it. It'll be a vote item, but we are recommending instead that the dollars revert to another project. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions about items F through H? Okay, let's move to item number 2, approval of our new bylaws. And I want to thank Linda and Heidi, and those others who helped out create this. So Linda and Heidi, how do you want to present these bylaws to us for a final vote?
So I'll start, Chairperson. We put it out as a draft last month, and we have not received any comments or questions back about it. So we'll be ready to move, but a motion. But before we do that, Heidi is going to just review the major parts of the bylaws in order for everyone in the public to understand what we're trying to do, which is we've never had any bylaws, and we wanted to put in place exactly what we were doing or what we needed to do, which we added a section about the electing a vice chairperson of the ISC. So Heidi, if you would walk us through.
Thank you, Mrs. Eberhardt. For the record, Heidi Detterar, Assistant Attorney General for the IAC. I do want to clarify, I think I forgot to mention this to you before, that there is a small technical change that Secretary McCord pointed out to me, that when we get to the section on the evaluation of the executive director, we talked about in these bylaws that would be in accordance with the state performance planning and evaluation program. We will be acting mostly in accordance with that program, but maybe using some different forms. So we're going to strike that clause and just say that the commission members will evaluate the performance of the executive director. But that was the only comment that that I received. I can maybe just start and see if there are any questions or comments before I do a brief overview.
Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, great. So we just start on page 1 with the name of the commission and the purposes of the commission. Importantly, on this page, the commission is an independent commission that functions within the Maryland State Department of Education, meaning that the Maryland State Department of Education provides some services to the commission, such as procurement and human resources, but the commission itself is an independent board and makes its own decisions. On page 2, Article 3 membership, some of the important things here are the first couple of sections are the statutory requirements. These are the statutorily required members and how they're appointed, and also what appointed members of the IAC may not be, namely folks that have business interests in contracts relating to public school construction and or are regulated lobbyists or are elected officials. Also, you may note here that the General Assembly did not set a term for the members, so the members get to serve forever. No good deed goes unpunished. So you may serve at the pleasure of your appointing authority. If a member wishes to resign, they would let their appointing authority know, as well as the chair and the executive director, so that someone else may be appointed in the case of resignation.
Heidi, can I ask a question?
Yes,
My role is statutorily defined, though, right? Like
it is.
There's no appointing authority for me, right?
It is, and I should make that clear. The 3 secretaries, the superintendent and the 2 secretaries are by virtue of their position, and so that is how they serve.
I will make sure I work out every day and eat healthy.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Just very quickly, moving on to page 3, just something to note here at the top of page 3. Other than the 2 secretaries and the superintendent, who are allowed to appoint designees per statute to attend meetings and vote in their place, votes may not be exercised by proxy. So the 6 members that are appointed by the governor and the leadership would need to appear personally to exercise their vote. We have also on page 3, the duties and powers of the commission members, and these are pretty standard. There is a delegation of duties to the executive director down at the bottom of page 3. And these are kind of the things that you would expect in keeping with the types of things that the executive director does, employing the commission staff and supervising all of the commission staff, and then any other things that the commission may delegate to the executive director as time goes by. On page 4, we talk about commission officers. Mostly we're talking here about, so statutorily, the chair of the commission is appointed jointly by the governor, the president of the Senate, and the speaker of the House. That's set forth in statute. Notably here, we are adding a vice chair. A vice chair will be appointed to a 2-year term by the chair of the commission with the approval by vote of at least the majority of the commission members. So this is something new. This is just to allow, Senator Casemeyer, if he can't always be at every meeting, to ask his vice chair to be able to run those meetings. That's the end of page 4. Page 5, we talk about meetings, quorums, and public participation. Importantly here, a quorum, as with most bodies, is a majority of the commission members. In the event of a vacancy, we recently had a vacancy on the commission, which didn't affect the quorum, but if we had one that would normally affect a quorum will consist of a majority of the members currently serving. So a vacancy doesn't mean that your quorum remains the same. Okay, on page 6, open meetings, minutes, publication of meeting notice. You are subject to the Open Meetings Act, and your staff will ensure that you're in compliance. Notably here, just something to keep in mind at on page 6 at 4F. Any communications among 5, your current quorum is 5, among 5 or more of the members, be it email or, gathering around the water cooler or seeing each other at an event, could constitute a quorum. So the best advice I can give you is if you see each other out at a party, talk about the weather or the Orioles, and not anything having to do with the IAC. The publication of the meeting notice will be on the commission's website and in several other places. That's done within a reasonable period of time. We're trying to ensure that the draft meeting agenda and materials are submitted to the members within 7 days before the meeting. You all are also subject to the Maryland Public Ethics Law. If you have any questions about that, you're welcome to ask me. You can also contact the State Ethics Commission. And finally, the bylaws can be amended by a vote of the majority of the current members of the commission. So these are your draft bylaws with that one change I noted about the evaluation.
Where's that part that you changed?
Sure, that's on there. It's in 2 spaces. It's on page 3 at 7, subsection B, item 5, just a little V.
Okay.
So we'll just strike out the language in accordance with the state performance planning and evaluation program, since it will be slightly different. And then also on page 4, article 4, section 2, subsection A, item 3. Same exact language will be struck, just to ensure that everybody understands that we will be using a different form, although we will be complying with the performance and evaluation program. We will be using a different form.
So when we vote on this, do we have to amend it, or can we just vote as it is?
You can just note that the amendment that I mentioned, or just striking in any case any reference to the state performance planning and evaluation program.
Do I hear a motion on approval of the bylaws? Ms. Eberhardt, here a second. Okay, Mr. Gibbons. Any discussion about the bylaws, the proposed bylaws? So I'm sorry, Ms. Eberhardt, that your motion would include the fact that we're making the alterations that Heidi prescribed. Okay. Again, thank you, Linda, and everybody. Bylaws in front of you, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All opposed? Okay. Good. Item 3, Prince George's County William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center. Gene Shanholtz. Gene? Hi.
Good afternoon, Chair Case-Meyer and members of the Commission. On April 21st, 2022, staff of the IAC received a request from PGCPS to cancel the fiscal year 2021 and 2022 replacement renovation project at William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center and amend the fiscal year 2023 replacement renovation project at the William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center. According to the LEA, the project has faced several challenges exacerbated by the pandemic and enhanced regulatory review required due to the uniqueness of the site facility in comparison to other more typical school buildings, leading to delays in the overall schedule. Funds allocated in fiscal year 2021 will expire if not under contract by the Board of Education by May 31st, 2022, pursuant to Education Article Section 5303, Item J. By rescinding the allocations and amending the fiscal year 2023 CIP to include the project, PGCPS expects to have sufficient time to execute the project. IAC staff recommend approval. I can now stand for any questions or read the motion.
Any questions for Gene? Want to read the motion, please?
Yes, Chair. 1, to approve the cancellation of PGCPS fiscal year 2021 William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center replacement renovation project. 2, to approve the cancellation of PGCPS fiscal year 2022 William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center replacement renovation project. 3, transfer the state allocation for the 2 fiscal years totaling $19,037,000 to the LEA's reserved prior year appropriations account. 4, amend the fiscal year 2023 CIP and apply $19,037,000 from the reserved prior year appropriations account to the fiscal year 2023 William Schmidt Outdoor Educational Center replacement renovation project.
Thank you. Will somebody make that motion, please? Ms. Eberhardt, here a second. Mr. Secretary Churchill, any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 4, before Griselle begins, we have a guest that she will introduce. Griselle?
Good afternoon, members of the commission and chair. I will begin reading.
You want to introduce your guest first?
Sure. We have with us today Baltimore City Director of Construction, Design and Planning, Ms. Cindy Smith.
Good to see you, Cindy. Thank you for coming. Okay, item 4 is Baltimore City rescission and amendment of 5 projects. Griselle, go ahead.
On April 19th, 2022, the IAC staff received a letter from Baltimore City Public School System, which you can find on page 59 and 60 of the agenda, to rescind and amend 5 HVAC, multi-systemic, and roof projects from fiscal year 21 CIP and amend it to fiscal year 23 CIP with increases in project costs ranging from 35 to 50%. City Schools was unable to complete the design and proceed to award contracts before the 2-year statutory timeframe due to challenges regarding COVID and inflation within labor and materials, as well as equipment delays. Therefore, their request is to rescind and amend these projects into fiscal year 23 CIP and use additional funds from their prior year reserved appropriations account to cover the difference. As demonstrated in Table 1, Design Progress, only 3 of these projects have made significant design progress within the last 2 years. The IAC staff recommendations can be found on Table 2 and are as follows. Harlem Park and Curtis Bay projects to be rescinded and amended into the fiscal year 23 CIP with only 10% of the eligible design cost at 96% of the state cost share. These projects will have the opportunity to progress into design, and the remaining construction funding requests can be submitted in the upcoming FY24 CIP. Franklin Square, George Washington, and Walbrook projects have progressed into design and will be amended into the fiscal year 23 CIP with full project funding eligible at 96% of the state cost share. Before I read the final motion, if any members have any questions or concerns regarding the IAC staff recommendation or the original request from Baltimore City, Ms. Cindy Smith is also here to join us to answer any of your questions.
Cindy, would you like to say anything? Or that's not necessary?
I'm just here for questions, so
Okay.
clarify any questions. So
Okay. Why don't you read the motion, just Griselle?
This motion is to approve 1, the rescission of 5 Baltimore City Schools FY21 Capital Improvement Program projects. 2, to transfer the state allocation totaling to $28,600,066 to the LEA's reserved prior year appropriations account. 3, to amend the FY23 CIP to include 5 of the Baltimore City projects, including the design funding for only 2 projects and the full funding for the 3 projects, including the estimated increases. And 4, to apply $23,991,960 from the reserved prior year appropriations account to the fiscal year 23 capital improvement projects for the 5 projects as presented in Table 2.
Thank you. Would someone like to make that motion, please? Secretary Churchill?
So moved.
Second by Superintendent. Any more discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Griselle.
Thank you.
Item 5, FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program, a complete recommendation. Arabia?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Annually, the IAC receives CIP requests for public school construction and approves eligible project budgets in 3 cycles, which occurs in December, February, and May. For fiscal year 23, the IAC received a total of 190 requests, totaling $510 million from 22 local education agencies and the Maryland School for the Blind. Due to the following factors, the amount of funding requested has fluctuated. the rescission of previously approved project and requests by local authorities for the inclusion of the project in this year's CIP, and also the local Board of Education's removal of projects from this year's CIP that were funded through the Built to Learn Act of 2020 and the Healthy Schools Facility Fund program. For projects funded through one of these programs that remained in the CIP, the IC team modified the project status to a D, project denied, to ensure that an allocation from multiple funding sources would not occur. We understand that a few LEAs have expressed concerns about projects being shown with the D status. Our plans are to address those concerns by making it clear in the final publication that the projects were not denied because they were ineligible. It was simply that the project received funding through a different funding source. All projects presented for funding and approval have been determined to be eligible based on an analysis of the state's future funding obligations, the LEA's preventive maintenance efforts, total cost of ownership of the school facilities, a thorough evaluation of project scopes, enrollment growth or declines, and the level of design progress. Given the influx of funding for fiscal year 23, the IC previously agreed that it was acceptable to recommend funding for projects that would not be ready to move forward until the beginning of fiscal year 24 to prevent the dollars from losing purchasing power. The capital budget designated $285 million in new authorization and PAYGO funding for the CIP. If we can please turn to page 63, I will walk you through the summary of project recommendations. So columns A through E includes the name of local education agencies, the target allocations based on the LEA's 10-year average and enrollments, total requests for fiscal year 23, and a total number of planning and funding requests being recommended. Columns F and G are the IC approvals at the 75% and 90% cycles. Column H contains new authorization recommended by staff totaling $33 million, which includes $500,000 recommended by staff to be held in reserve for the Department of General Services consulting fees. If the funding is not needed by DGS, it will be held in reserve for the IC to apply to other projects, including projects that come in over or that are granted gross area baseline variances. Column I is the total amount of new authorization that the IC team is recommending be allocated to eligible funding requests. Column J accounts for prior year enrollment growth and relocatable classroom funds, also known as EGRC, recommended by staff for projects in Frederick and Prince George's totaling $19.1 million. As background, for commission members and the public, a county is eligible for funding through this program when the enrollment growth is 150% above the 5-year statewide average, or 250 relocatable classrooms are in use based on the 5-year statewide average. Column K represents the funding recommended through the FY23 EGRC initiative. Of the $95.3 million appropriation, $45 million in EGRC remains unallocated and available for distribution for Anne Arundel, Baltimore County, Frederick, Howard, and Montgomery County for use in a future fiscal year, as all their eligible requests are shown to be funded up to the maximum state construction costs. Column A indicates recommendations for prior year new authorization for distribution to LEAs. I would like to note a recent reduction to the Grantsville Open Space Enclosure Project in Garrett County. This action was performed to prevent the project from being overfunded. 48 of the $62 million in prior year appropriation is being recommended contingent on the IC's approval of the Baltimore City and Prince George's request to rescind previously approved projects, amendment of their FY23 CIP, and reallocation of the funding, which you just approved in items 3 and 4 of this agenda. The total prior year funds available for allocation is $81.5 million. Of that amount, 19 million remains unallocated for certain LEAs that have either chosen to utilize the dollars in the next fiscal year or are in the process of identifying projects that are eligible. Column M represents the staff's recommendation from all funding sources identified on the summary report for a total of 416 million, which consists of 412 million for projects and a total of 4.2 million being held in reserve. Column O reflects the percentage of LEA requests by the total amount of funds available for allocation. I stand for questions, and Fred is available for technical support.
You got to take a long breath.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. Bob, you want to add anything to all that?
No, we have a lot of funding sources, Mr. Chair. And so this year has been very difficult. Arabia, Fred, and all of the regional manager team have just done a great job working with the LEAs. And we are holding back some funds that, for instance, will be backfilled with the Built to Learn so that we can ensure the best use of the funds throughout the state towards the highest needs. These would be the CIP dollars and the EGRC dollars. More to come on those.
Fred, you want to add anything before we vote?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Someone, you want to make the motion, Arabia?
Yes, sir. If the commission agrees, I would like to modify the motion to account for the recent reduction of the open space enclosure project in Garrett County to avoid the overfunding of it.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the fiscal year 23 capital improvement program in a total amount of 416 million, including 412 million for allocation to funding and planning projects, 500,000 for the Department of General Service, design consulting fees, and reserving 3,779,000 in new authorization for unanticipated projects, and to authorize the IAC staff to make minor adjustments to allocations based on calculations of the project's net state funding amount to avoid the over and underfunding of a project.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion on that? Somebody move that, please. Okay. Secretary Churchill, thank you. Second, Ms. Everhart. Any more discussion on that? Secretary McCord.
Just an observation. Thanks again for the hard work of everybody that works at the IAC, making sure that this money goes to where it's needed most, and which we have more pots to take it from this time. It used to be much more difficult to make the decisions at this point in our lifetime as a commission. It's easier because of the good work that you do. And people need to understand that there are other places for funding to come from. This kind of used to be the big thing, and now there's other places that money can come from. And we're balancing that in a way that makes the most sense. And I appreciate that. And, just the rough look at it would say that 48% of the money went to 4 jurisdictions, but they're large jurisdictions with large needs. And so we have to make sure that everybody understands that even though 4 jurisdictions are taking nearly half of this money, there are other pieces of money that are yet to be allocated or have already been allocated. So all the work that's done to keep track of the projects is totally commendable. And I just want to put my commendation in for keeping track of all of it. So Arabia and Bob and all your staff, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Well spoken.
Thank you.
Staff did a great job. Any more comments on the motion? All in favor of the motion by Arabia, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Okay. The HVAC, item 6, the HVAC progress report. Griselle in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Chair. 16 out of 19 facilities are now operational. Updates to construction expenditures were made as of May 3rd, 2022. Ms. Cindy Smith from Baltimore City has also joined us today to add any additional comments you may have. Per the chart, Callaway Elementary is moving into the final design and procurement phase, and the anticipated construction start date of July 2022 with a 1-year duration and anticipated completion for July 2023. Projects Thomas Johnson and Windsor Hills are on track for project completion for August 2022. As of May 3rd, 100% has been allocated, 90% contracts have been contracted, and 83% has been expended for these contracts. There's no motion.
Yeah.
Just for information.
Any questions for Griselle about the status report? Thanks, Griselle.
Mr. Chair, would you want to say anything about overall HVAC projects within Baltimore City? There's been concern through the years, and you've done a really great job trying to get things done with the resources you have available. I've said to the commission before, the vertical package units were genius, really, the way that you've added another 15, 20 years life to facilities that aren't going to last as an overall facility much longer than that. But in your words, any comments on this particular report or Baltimore City's heating and cooling in general?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind comments about the VPUs. I'm just going to take credit for that for this due. We came up with that, solely on our own. We were the first ones to do that in the state, and it has definitely been a lifesaver in getting the air conditioning in really across the district. This one, I know that there were questions at the last IAC meeting about Callaway in particular on the 15 million report. So just to indicate, when we went into that project, we were just going to do unit ventilators, and when we started actually the design and all of the field work, we really kind of found that the pipes were bad, the boiler was bad, the fan coil units, like everything. So we, putting in whatever was left in the funds from the 15 million plus some local funds, we kind of started back from scratch and really just reevaluated our scope for that project to determine what the real need was, to make sure we were addressing the whole need. My philosophy has always been to try to fix the whole thing rather than just the pieces and the parts. Which has been, we've done a lot of pieces and parts in the past. So I want to do the whole thing. And so that's what we were trying to do with that, as well as several of the rest of these. So it's unfortunate we've had a lot of material delays that hit Thomas Johnson and Windsor Hills. But I think, with the Callaway project, we'll have really impacted a lot of schools with this and with all the other funding we've received.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to item 7, Baltimore City Revised Enhanced Approval Package, Commodore John Rogers Elementary and Middle School. Griselle and Fred.
Thank you. This motion is to approve the revisions made to the enhanced approval package for the Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle School, dated from November 2021 under the 21st Century Buildings Program. Per the MOU, the 10-year plan process approval for Commodore John Rogers was initially approved by IAC on November 15th in 2018. Since then, there have been some changes, and the project type has changed from an addition renovation to a full replacement project. This final approval of the revised EAP from Baltimore City Schools Board was just received on May 10th, 2022. Some items worth noting regarding the change of the addition renovation to the replacement project allowed the reduced total cost of ownership to be reduced significantly by the demolition of the existing buildings A and B with systemics that have already reached their remaining use of life. Also reducing the state average of 155 gross square foot per student to 114 gross square foot per student due to the building's smaller footprint. All the ed specs and enrollment capacities and effectiveness are still being met, and the total cost is estimated to be around $52 million and is somewhat expected to be in the high 50s due to the inflation that we have seen this past year and economic supply chain issues. In addition, there are a few other changes that have been made between Baltimore City Public Schools and the 21st Century Buildings Program. However, they do not require IAC Commission approval per the MOU. Project delivery date changed from December 2024 to August 2025 due to swing date changes to reduce interruptions during the school year to the students. The additional change has also been the project delivery method, which changed from a design build to a construction management at risk design bid build. This delivery method has been used on 26 of the 27 schools that have been now completed by the 21st Century projects. And I'm not sure if Fred had anything else to add, but this is basically the update.
Just like to say that this request represents an excellent example of evolution of a project and a collaborative willingness to work towards an improved solution. The city schools, the design team, Maryland Stadium Authority, and MSDE as a participant in some of these meetings realized that the replacement solution was better in the long run and for the students than any of the renovation addition schemes that were on the table, and ultimately made that pivot. So this is a very good outcome.
Thank you, Fred. You want to read the motion, Priscilla or Fred?
Yes, the motion is to approve the revisions made to the enhanced approval package for Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle School, dated as of November 2021.
Do I hear a motion supporting Secretary McCord, second, Ms. Everhart? Any more discussion? Secretary McCord.
Just briefly, it really shows that a lot of effort was gone into to evaluate the options here. And so if we're coming out with reduced total cost of ownership and a true community asset, that is something new and something to look forward to after we've thought this thing through. I think it's a splendid project, and I appreciate going through all the detail that you provided to the IAC, and just want to congratulate everybody involved for making a new community asset. That possibility is really encouraging. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. The motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's move to item 8, Cecil Manor Elementary School, HVAC project cancellation. Eileen Glad.
Good afternoon, Chair Casemeyer and members of the commission. I'll be presenting item 8, in which Cecil County is requesting the commission to approve project cancellation. Cecil County Public Schools rejected all bids for the Cecil Manor Elementary School HVAC replacement project because the lowest potential bid was 30% higher than the estimated budget, and the LEA was unable to fund the local share overage. In anticipation of the bidding climate, the engineer evaluated the project and organized the contract into a base bid and 3 additive alternates. This is like negotiating the cost of a base model car separate from the cost of the upgrade packages, leaving the LEA the option to buy only the base model if that is all they can afford. For this project specifically, the LEA was prepared to reuse existing pumps, air separator, expansion tanks, and chemical feeders since their replacement work was moved into the add alternate scopes. The 30% cost overage that I cited earlier was the cost of the lowest base bid above the construction estimate of all work. So please consider that to compare apples to apples, the lowest base price or the lowest bid price for the base bid plus the 3 alternates was actually 1.7 times higher than the engineer's estimate. And the second lowest bid with all 3 alternates was more than twice the engineer's estimate. The LEA intends to resubmit the project with an adjusted cost as part of their fiscal year 24 capital improvement program submission. However, the local share remains an IAC staff concern due to upcoming funding requirements of the Northeast Middle School High School replacement project. We will continue to work with the LEA to ensure their capital needs are met and find a path forward for their critical projects. IAC staff recommend approval of the motion. I can now stand for any questions or read the motion.
Any questions for Eileen? Secretary Churchill.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen, for the description. I just out of curiosity, because I'm trying to determine is this really the tip of the iceberg for more of these types of things to come. Was the original estimate for this project done pre-COVID? Or would you know the original estimate?
Yes, yeah, I did look at that. It was, I believe it was 2019 that it was done, so it was pre-COVID. They applied for fiscal year 21 and 22 funds for this, and so to spread it out, and so it was done in preparation for the fiscal year 21 cycle.
And I knew I was probably setting this up for Mr. Gibbons, but you probably can give some more thought. I think this has been mentioned before, but I believe that this is the start of an ongoing process that we'll be seeing.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Secretary, I think that, and Bob, I assume you guys are seeing this across the board with what you're doing. I mean, we're seeing 30% increases since February in a lot of our construction materials, not since pre-COVID, but since February of this year. So I think this is not surprising at all if we're talking about a pre-COVID bid.
Thank you. Eileen, you want to read the motion again? Read the motion.
To approve the cancellation of Cecil County Public Schools fiscal year 21 and 22 Cecil Manor HVAC project and transfer the state's allocation totaling $1,597,000 to the LEA's reserved prior year appropriations account.
Someone make that motion, please. Secretary of the Court, second. Superintendent. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Eileen. Bob, are we? I'm assuming we're seeing this problem that Brian described, or
we are, and really only in the last several.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and really in the last several months, it's really accelerated. We are looking at prices. We started off this for our dollar per square foot for whole schools at around 5%. From past years, we've been between 3.5% and 4%. We raised it to 5%. It looks like we're going to end up at 11% higher, and most of this has occurred on recent bids. It's a supply side issue. As COVID passed and people decided, all right, well, now's the time to build, we can see light at the end of the tunnel. There's so much competition that all of the materials on the supply side are being bid by suppliers that are reselling them to try to keep their companies going. I expect, and from what I've seen in industry, that this may taper down relatively quickly within the next 8 or 10 months. So delaying this project and then coming back and looking at it again is a good strategy.
Right. Okay.
And I should say, particularly HVAC, because of the COVID scare, and the public is demanding, of course, in schools that their kids are kept safe. So there's a lot of competition.
Okay. Item 9, Montgomery, built to learn, Poolsville High School, Arabia.
Yes, on February the 10th, the IAC team recommended and the commission approved the maximum state construction cost for the Poolsville High School addition renovation project based on Montgomery County's project request. In April, the LEA resubmitted a revised project budget that included prevailing wages. Approval of the project budget by the IAC team is recommended based on the review and recalculation of the state construction cost. I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Arabia about this item? Pretty interesting. Arabia, you want to state the motion again?
Yes, sir. To approve the revisions to a previously approved project as presented to be funded and executed through the Build to Learn Act. The total revised allocation increases the project by $20,227,000. Final funding amounts are subject to adjustment based upon finalization of project worksheets and review of project eligibility.
So Bob, do you want to re-explain that 24.9%, or do most people know that?
Let me get caught up here.
Prevailing wage issue?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, this is if any more than, let me take that. If any more than 25% of anything less than 25% state share, you don't have to pay prevailing wage per statute. So Montgomery has kept theirs slightly below that so that they don't have to use a prevailing wage scale for all of the spending on their projects. On some of these bigger projects with greater state participation, they can get up to 150% of the gross area baseline. They've done the math, and they believe that they can come out ahead with state funding by going ahead and paying the prevailing wage on these projects. We estimate the cost of prevailing wage to be between 8.5% and 12%, roughly. We did a report on that that's available that we had sent to the governor and the General Assembly last year. I think it was the end of last year.
Someone want to make a motion on Arabia made? Does somebody want to make that motion, please? Ms. Everhart, thank you. Ever second? Mr. Gibbons, any more discussion about Poolsville? All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. One more information item, number 10, public school enrollment projections. Alfred and Jamie.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'm Jamie Bridges, the manager of planning for IAC, and I'm joined by Al Sedera, the manager of projections in the State Data Center for Maryland Department of Planning. We are before you guys to deliver an informational item on enrollment projections for the state of Maryland for the years 2022 to 2031, and we will stand for questions after that. So why do we project enrollment? Student enrollment is important to capital school construction because together with educational program, it defines the need or the demand for educational space. You don't have to be an educational facilities planner to walk into a school and to know if the supply meets the demand or not. It's simple. However, if it takes 5+ years to plan, design, and construct a school, you need to project enrollment in order to know what the demand for the educational space will be in 5+ years in order to supply it, which is much less simple. But it is mission critical for the state of Maryland and for all 24 of our LEAs. Too little space and a school is not educationally sufficient, and too much, well, if capital construction funds are constrained, then too much space at one school is not fair to students without enough space at another. And if operations and maintenance funds are also constrained, and in today's world they are, then too much space is not fiscally sustainable. So how do we project enrollment? In general, we use a cohort survival method. It is part science and part art, but the cohort survival method starts with birth records, determines of those births how many of those students end up in kindergarten, and then based on historic grade progression rates, the population is then sort of marched on through as cohorts while the next year's kindergarten class is projected. It's also an art, though, because these things vary across time, they vary across space, and they vary at different scales. A good example would be residential development or redevelopment. That is an example of something that may create some in-migration. And the rate at which housing units produce students varies by the development type, the development size, and depends on where it is as well. So in Maryland, we're fortunate. While there is a lot of this variation in how LEAs operate and who does what and how, we have a lot of experience in projections. The public school construction program has been around for more than 50 years, and the requirement for LEAs to project enrollment has been a part of that process for most of those years. So how do we develop enrollment projections in Maryland? It is an annual collaborative process. Statewide, the Department of Planning develops statewide projections at the LEA level, and then the LEAs can also develop their own projections. If those projections are within 5% of each other, then the LEAs can just roll forward using those. If not, MDP will sit down with the LEAs and talk about how the assumptions of those projections and how to get them within 5%. And then once they are, then those projections can be used to develop the annual educational facilities master plan. And then that is used to develop the capital improvement program or any capital projects. We use the projected enrollment to determine and the state participation or the maximum state construction allocation for capital projects. So it's very important. Now, I want to pass the mic to Al Sandera with a story on what the most recent 2022 to 2031 enrollment projections show.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm going to give a quick overview of our projections and some of our findings for the last couple of years. This chart basically shows migration data. And Jamie mentioned migration is a component of how our school predictions or school enrollment shape up. I have data here showing data from 1980s, 90s to 2010 decade. So in the 80s, like we had both domestic in-migration and international migration at an equal rate into Maryland. And in the recent past decade, in the 2010s, we had a lot of domestic out-migration, but we have replaced most of that out-migration with domestic international migration. So as you can see, we lost 20,000 people in 2010s due to out-migration in Maryland, but we gained 23,000 people roughly through international migration. So what does this do? Like on the next chart, slide, this shows the composition of the student by race. So the yellow bars show the data from 2010. As you can see in the first box, the non-Hispanic white students were about 43% of the student composition. In 2021, which we have the latest data for, there are about 33%, about 1 in every 3 students are non-Hispanic white. But like if you look at the Hispanic population data, back in 2010, 1 out of every 10 students were Hispanic. But in 2021, 1 out of every 5 students is of Hispanic origin. What does this do to school planning? I guess like you need to probably have more ELA type classrooms that could have an impact. But again, like I'm just pointing out the change of demographics and what it does to the composition of the students. So we'll go to the next slide. So this chart shows historical public school enrollment data starting from 2010 all the way through 2021. As you can see on the chart from 2010 to 2019, the public school enrollments increased roughly about a little over 50,000 in the last 9-10 years. And from 2020, that's the year of the COVID, we saw a steep decline, and then followed by 2021, a little more decline, a further decline. So we were trying to explore what happened to this decline in students in public schools and what's going on. So on the next slide, this slide basically shows the change of public school enrollments each year. That's the same information that was on the previous chart, but it just shows the change in data. From 2011 to 2019, on an average, the public school enrollments increased by about 6,000 a year. In 2020, we saw a decline of a little over 18,000. And this is the year of the COVID. And then the following year, we anticipated the school enrollments to go up, but they did not as we thought. And that's the discussion we had with most of the LEAs, and they were suggesting that the enrollments would be back to normal or back where they were in 2019. So that did not happen. So we started exploring the other components of school enrollment data. On the next slide, we have information on this slide shows public school enrollments along with private school or non-public school enrollments. The gray boxes on the top of the yellow bars are the private school enrollments or non-public school enrollments. Now, as you can see, we have data for 2021. In 2020 or 2021, the private school enrollments haven't increased significantly. If you remember from the previous slide, from 19 to 20, we lost about a little over 18,000 students in enrollments in public schools. And that did not show up in private schools. If you see the difference in 19 to 20, it's only about a gain of 3,000 students in private schools. So actually on the next slide, we have the difference. So if you sum the public school enrollments and private school enrollments, this is a yearly change. I just want to focus on the last couple of years. In 2020, with public school and private school enrollments, there's a drop of about 15,500 students. So now, where did these students end up going? So we try to explore other avenues and see if the students actually left Maryland or what's going on. Then we looked into the homeschool children data. So on the next slide, I have some information on homeschool children data. So the gray bars here on this chart are not to scale, but I just want to highlight them. That's why they look a little bigger. If you look at the data for homeschool children, which is in the gray bars, it's roughly about 22,000 to 27,000 from 2010 to 2019. So just a little bit of an increase along with the increase in public school enrollments. But if you say in 2020, the homeschool children increased by about around 15,000 from what they were the previous year. So this probably was a missing factor when we were looking at the enrollment predictions last year, which we did not look into, but we were able to identify that the students haven't really left Maryland, but the mode of education has changed from public school to homeschooling children because of the restrictions of COVID, of parents staying at home and trying to help their children along with the schooling and not enrolling them in schools. And on the next slide, this basically shows all types of school enrollment. The gold or the yellow color bars are the public school enrollments, and the orangish color bars are the private school enrollments, and the blue bars at the top are the private school enrollments. I'm going to focus basically on the 19 to 20 data. If you look at 2019 data, which is the peak year of school enrollments in Maryland, and from that point to 2020, the decline between when you sum up all these three items is only about 600. We lost only about 600 students in school enrollments. But most of the students that were not showing up in the public school system ended up being homeschooled. If this trend continues on, then that's something the planning folks need to do about how public school facilities are built or maintained and all that stuff. So that's what I wanted to point out here. So again, like this slide is basically historical homeschool children data from 2011 to 2020. And I've shown on the chart, there's a little increase going all the way to 2018. And 2020 is the year I want to point out. There's about a 15,000 increase in public school students. Homeschool students, that's roughly about 53% increase. This is what I wanted to focus on, that this mode of education has shifted a little, but if this trend continues to happen in the future, our public school enrollments will be a little lower than they were in the past. And until we observe a few years of data, if this is going to come back from the 40,000 odd homeschool children to 20,000, we would not see a dramatic increase in public school enrollments as we have projected. So on this is probably I think the last slide in my presentation deck, but I can answer questions. This slide shows the annual projected increase in school students for the next 10-year period. And the first 3 years of our projection horizon from 2022 to 2024, we are projecting a little increase in school students. And from 2025 on, the middle part of our projection period, we are projecting a little decline. And the last 2 years, just a little increase. But the gist of this is the declines that we are projecting in the middle part of the projection period is mainly due to the decline in births. As Jamie mentioned, births is an important factor in our predictions. And the predictions for 2025 incorporate births that happened in 2019, actually 2020. That's the year of the pandemic. And there were significantly lower births than in the previous years. And also in the past couple of years, from actually going back to 2017, the births in Maryland as a whole have been declining. And this is not just a trend for Maryland, but it's also the same trend we have been seeing in the country as a whole. There are several factors that, and there were a few articles that were written about this I can share with you folks. But the gist is like the average family size has been declining, and the number of births are declining. And if you have lower births, this has an impact on the students that will be showing up in public schools. That's what our predictions are showing.
Thank you, Jamie and Alan. Appreciate the work. Very interesting data. Any questions for Al or Jamie about the present? Linda?
Yes, I thought it was very interesting when I was reading it this week. 2 questions. I know 2021 isn't finished, but do you have any projections for the homeschool enrollment for this year?
I do not have that data, ma'am. I have reached out to MSDE and they compile the data at the end of the school year. So we have to wait till like the school year ends to get that data. So that's why I did not show the 2021 homeschool data on the charts.
I just didn't know if you had a sense if this trend was going to continue, because it would be very significant.
Right. I think this year, at least, looking at the public school enrollments data, it might be in the same line as it was in 2020, because our public school enrollments as a whole saw a decline of about 5,000, a little more than 5,000 students. So it's not like students are leaving Maryland and going out. It's just that, like I mentioned, the medium or mode of education has changed a little and it hasn't come back. And as you are aware, most of 2021, we were still operating under closures, and the impacts of COVID haven't gone off completely. And to an extent in 2022, so we'll have to see that.
And the other question is, if could you get us where this homeschool, I mean, with this large increase, which counties? Was there a difference in the percentage? You don't have to tell me now. If you just can have it, I think that would be helpful to be able to see, was it concentrated in, you know, the wealthier counties because there were more parents at home, or, you know, just some kind of idea of where these students might be within the state.
I can get that information.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I agree.
Yep. We have the data. I'll send it over to Jamie and he can show you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for either the gentleman? Secretary McCord?
Yeah, it's a thank you to Jamie and to Al. Of course, Al is in my shop at the Department of Planning. We have been looking at this ever since the pandemic started, actually. We've been trying to gather every piece of data from all the demographers across the country who started to study the issue really early on. And everybody initially thought it would be like a snowstorm and everybody stayed cozy together and then we're going to have a baby boom. It's exactly the opposite. It's a baby bust in lots of places across the country because people were already having children later in life, and then they're postponing the next child, or they've decided to not have the child. So that's happening across the country also, in the same way that you've got, there's the perception from some of the deeper dives people are doing is that once a safety net is starts to fray or give way for public services, and there are people who will decide to postpone the child rearing because they're not going to have the same level of support before. So that process has started this baby bust situation that it will rebound eventually, but it doesn't rebound right away. And so we have to, of course, Al and I talk about taking the long run because as Jamie said earlier, as Bob said earlier, it takes a while to build the school and have it ready for when the kids are going to come through. So we're trying to stay as close to the actual data as we can and the projections that we can. I can't get totally swayed by every piece of material that comes out from the demographers because they're not necessarily Maryland, speaking about Maryland, but we're learning from across the country what's happening in those communities also. And we're staying in touch with the people that we know and trust and the people at the University of Maryland that we can bounce ideas off of about what's happening with the population of the children. So it is, it's not time for everybody to go out and start making their tater tots and little cold chilled milks to make sure that kids miss it from school. But I'm telling you, we try to predict early on that we might be seeing a baby bust instead of a baby boom. And I don't know if there's a boomlet that's going to happen later. That may not come back in the same way that we have experienced that in other times. So it's kind of an unprecedented time. And for the unprecedented time, our people have been trying to stay on top of it for the benefit of the state and every different sector of the economy. But for this project, for this, I'm happy to report that the school systems themselves, because I see every one of those letters come back to say what their projections are. Their projections are still pretty much in line with our projection are, because we've been sharing the data, sharing the ideas. And so we've been generally in line with most of the jurisdictions. So we're not wildly looking at the world differently. And just want to put that little behind the scenes view to you to let you understand that we were on top of it when the shutdown started happening. We've been reading the data, reading the academic articles, and then we've been paying attention to whatever scraps of information we can get about how it applies to Maryland. Because quite frankly, I'm not responsible for the rest of the country. I'm responsible for making sure the kids in Maryland have that place to sit and learn. So I just commend Al and his group for doing that, and Jamie's help along with Al. I congratulate both of you for staying on top of it, and the ramifications we're still continuing to explore, not debate, but this to discuss the ramifications as we move forward. So thanks to those guys for staying on top. All right.
Mr. Derenberg.
Is there any way to predict how many of those homeschool kids will come back into public schools in a time frame, or is that impossible?
It's not really an easy thing to do, because we're talking about it's a family decision, and then it's a situation where they might have had a bad experience in one family with the homeschooling and a better experience in another, and it depends on the grade level of the children. There's the social factors there about the kids thriving in cohorts together and not thriving in other cohorts, and so it's a very complicated thing. The short answer is I don't have a real good way to pinpoint that.
Another thing I would add is, you can't definitely predict that, but our official enrollment snapshot for this year, so you guys have it, because we do publish these data reports every year. Remember, September 30th is the official count day for enrollment, is 881,471. So 881,471. So there's a trend back up to 900,000. Maryland was over 900,000 at one point. So, and this is public school enrollment, by the way. But yes, the pandemic did a number everywhere. I mean, I saw this in Texas, every urban city, as well as suburban urban counties, and just across the state. And the shift to virtual learning was disruptive. And, those that waited longer saw bigger losses, and just from family angst to either choosing a private school that was open sooner or discovering homeschool. And also the demographic of homeschool is actually no longer just, you would think it would, that like homeschool has been seen a huge spike in minority populations also choosing the option as well, which wasn't the case before. And this is a national phenomenon. Like the census just recently did a pulse survey, and it revealed that. But our enrollment did swing back up in this count. So we're at 881,471. So we're pushing back at 900,000. But to do a methodology to say, hey, you're more likely to come back. Like I go to schools all the time, and a principal, I was at Baltimore County, and he said, I know a fact, I lost these 20 kids. 10 are completely lost. I don't know where they are, but the other 10, I know that they're sitting at a private school or homeschool, and I called them and I asked them, please come back. They don't want to come back. So, there's that phenomenon. And this is a principle, because, these are dollars dollars translate into positions, and so at the school, and so it's going to take hustling and such, but a methodology can't capture that. You can only capture, housing trends and markets and things like that, and birth rates and such, which also requires facility decisions, which are tough, especially when you start using words like consolidation and things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for adding to the conversation. It is fascinating. Something we ought to talk about more when we have more time.
Yeah.
Mr.
Chair, I just want to make one comment and compliment Secretary McCord. He's been building the capacity for GIS mapping so that we can look more granularly at this type of data and on shorter dwells and kind of watch the trends. And maybe we'll be able to offer feedback to ourselves, to Superintendent Chaudhary and others in their decision making. Sometimes when you can see how things are moving, it's more revealing than just looking at the broad county by county level.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, I think we're going to skip item 11 and do that at the next our next meeting. So for our last agenda item, we're going to discuss a personnel matter. And pursuant to Section 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I'll ask for a motion to close this meeting. Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second? Okay, the motion carries. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? So the commission will now move to a closed session. We'll probably come back in, I hope, 15 or 20 minutes or so. So Heidi and Cassandra, you want to do whatever we have to do to go to closed session on the computer?
Yes. Brett, will you please stop the recording?
Recording stopped.
There we go. And end the stream.
Okay, we're back in open session. While we were in closed session, as most of you know, Bob Gorell announced that he would be leaving at the end of the month. And we had to go into closed session to work out, who we were going to appoint as the acting executive director until we find a permanent final candidate. And we now have a need to make a motion to appoint a new acting executive director. And Heidi, do you want to read the motion that someone will authorize after you read it?
Sure, Mr. Chair. The motion is to appoint Alex Donahue, who is the Commission's Deputy Director for Field Operations, as Acting Executive Director beginning June 1st, 2022, and continuing until a new Executive Director is appointed and begins working in that position.
Who wants to make that motion?
Motion.
Mr. Superintendent, second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion about the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? Well, we want to welcome Alex and assure him that we will give him our total support during this time frame, and I'm sure he's going to do a great job. Also, while we were in closed session, we selected several members to be on a search committee for a permanent executive director, and that committee will include Linda Eberhardt, Mr. Gibbons, Secretary Churchill, and myself. So with that, this is a sad day in many ways for us to say goodbye to Bob, but Cassandra, do you have something for us to read? Bob, in honor of your retirement, we want to thank you for your service to the Interagency Commission and on school construction. Your nearly 5 decades of experience in the architectural and construction industry, of which more than 2 decades were dedicated to improving statewide school facilities portfolios, contributed to your outstanding leadership during a time of immense change in the Maryland school construction program. During your tenure, you provided a clear and powerful vision to guide the IAC as it works to achieve a safe, healthy, educationally sufficient, and fiscally sustainable learning environment for every child in Maryland. Bob, we wish you the best. And now Cassandra has a citation she wanted to present to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to the plaque, we also have a governor's citation to issue to Bob. Robert Gorell, greetings. Be it known that on behalf of the citizens of this state, in recognition of the 6 years of dedicated and outstanding service you have made on behalf of the Interagency Commission on School Construction, in honor of the high level of professionalism, expertise, and commitment you have demonstrated throughout your distinguished career, and as the people of Maryland join in expressing our great respect, admiration, and sincere best wishes on the occasion of your retirement, we are pleased to confer upon you this governor's citation.
Oh,
Thank
boy.
you, Cassandra. Anybody want to say anything to Bob?
I'm so moved.
Linda, you want to say something? Linda, you're on mute. Linda, you're on mute.
I'm okay. I'm no longer the newbie on the IAC, but I was for a number of years. And Bob, you have took so much time and patience with me and giving many, many hours to explain to me all the background and everything else. You were just unbelievable. And I will miss you. Maryland will miss you. And good luck going back to your home and with your grandchildren.
Thank you so much.
Anyone
And
else?
it's not hard talking to you, Linda, and I appreciate the questions. You can tell I love talking about this stuff.
Secretary McCord.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bob, you realize that we started off on exactly the right foot in the same direction, and then every 10 years, 2 little things come rolling my way called census and then redistricting. And so I get kind of swamped with that stuff. Now, I'm just at the time I'm coming up for air, I got a friend of mine that's headed out to cleaner air. So I congratulate you. And it's not just that you helped us to see things differently because of your experience. I mean, talking about total cost of ownership and talking about, gross area baselines and figuring out how much it's going to cost to keep this school going. But you always looked at it from what does it really look like for the kid in the seat, that child that has to learn. And you never lose sight of that. And you always kept us on that mission that we're here to make sure that what we do with that money, make sure that a kid has an opportunity to learn in the space that we're providing. So I really appreciate that. We've gotten way more sophisticated since I've been on this commission. Since it became a commission, it wasn't always a commission. Now it's a commission, its success is in large measure a reflection of what you've been able to do to get us oriented, make sure we're looking in the same direction. We don't always have to agree on every point, but you've got us looking in the same direction, and that has never changed. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bob, I just want to say we're very happy for you and your family, and really sorry to lose your many talents. You've always been a very positive and enthusiastic individual. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. You've brought new concepts to us, as Secretary McCord just mentioned. And what always impressed me is you did whatever it took to get the job done. And that's a quality many people don't have. And you've become a friend, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know you, and I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you, Chair Casemeyer.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Before we close out, do you want to just say anything, Bob?
Well, I want to say that this has been incredibly fulfilling for me to be here in Maryland. This has been the best segment of my life and my work life, and also my personal life. Chair Casemeyer and others, I share often the beauty of Maryland and sailing the Chesapeake, which is just wonderful. I mean, this state has so much to offer. I think Maryland currently, as far as our facilities and being able to get a solution in place that is achievable, is in better position than any other state in the country. The staff that you have supported me in building are incredible. I think you know that you can talk to them individually, and the stories and what we're looking at do connect. We're all looking in the same direction, and they're really bright and very capable. So for me, it's been easy in that way. I was able to get and blessed to get the right people, and I only had to kind of set a course, and they figured it out. And that makes my job easy. And I think that anybody in this position is going to enjoy that professionalism and expertise to get the job done, and they own it. And you couldn't ask, a manager couldn't ask for anything more. So I thank you for all of your support. And if you're ever in the West, I hope you give me a call because I'd like to show you that area of the country. It's different, and the beauty is it's completely different, 180 degree from Maryland. But I'd like to share if you come out that way.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Secretary Churchill.
Well, I'll be very quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair, to address Bob. And that is, Bob, I certainly am a personal admirer of your passion, your persistence, and your positivity. And I think you come away knowing that you've added value. We talk about change, and changes sometimes seem forced. I think you should definitely take credit that you're responsible for a transformation or start of a transformation within our system. So for that, I commend you, and I wish you the best of luck in the new chapter of your life.
Thank you, Secretary Churchill. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with me individually, and every one of you have, with few exception, and it's really making the opportunity to help me out. You've always shown interest, and personally interest in the success of the agency, Secretary Churchill, and I thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Do you hear a motion, we adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Bob.
As we say in Mexico.
Best of luck and see y'all next month.
Adios.
Bye, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Adios. Adios.